Hi, I'm Marcus Fairs, founder and editor-in-chief of Dezeen, and welcome to day 7 of Dezeen 15, a digital festival celebrating Dezeen's 15th birthday. We asked 15 creatives from around the world to come up with ideas for how to change the world over the next 15 years. Over the coming days, they'll all be presenting their manifestos for a better world. Today, we're speaking to designer Francesca Sarti about her ideas. Hi, Francesca.
Hi, Marcus.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
First question, we've been speaking to people as far away as Pakistan and Europe and Africa and the Americas, but you're a little bit closer to home. Tell us where you are today.
Yeah, I'm in London right now. So yeah, not too far from you.
Exactly. You could have come into the studio and done it here. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do and what is Arabeshi de Latte, which is your studio?
Well, I'm an architect, but many years ago, I founded the studio Arabeski di Latte. And the studio is a design studio based in London, originally was in Italy. They've been working on the boundaries between food and design. So using food as a tool to investigate different topics, to make statements, to create performances, workshops, interactive events. And in fact, the food has always been very important for its connection with human interaction. So that's why I've been working on it, and I've used it as a design tool. And,
but you yourself, you're not a food designer, are you? You said you're an architect. So how did you switch from designing buildings to facilitating dinners and things like that?
Well, while studying architecture, I had this strong passion for food, and I was attracted by the way food could activate spaces. So I started investigating the social implication and how food is really facilitate human interaction. And in a way, I feel that human interaction is deeply connected with buildings, even if not with the shell of it, or like with the way buildings are functioning. So I started researching on it, and even my graduation thesis was about, in a way, about bringing food on in a more interdisciplinary connection with spaces. And I designed a series of food kiosks that, yeah, like a potential architecture for creating connection inside the city and breaking barriers among people. So I see the connection with architecture, although, of course, when you are participating in an event where I have maybe kind of imagined the design or the styling, is difficult to see the connection. But after many years, I still see, not every time, but I still see it.
I don't know how long you've been living in London, but in the UK, maybe 20, 30 years ago, we had a reputation for having the worst food in the world. But there's really been a revolution in this country in the way people think about food in particular. And suddenly the TV channels are full of cooking programs. There's much more interest in cooking, it seems, than architecture and design. Coming from Italy, which has amazing food, what is your experience of living in London been?
Well, London is definitely has now one of probably the best food scene in the world. So we can still doing the joke we were doing at the time, like, oh, food in London is terrible, or when you go back to Italy, oh my God, how can you eat food in London? So now the food scene is great. But then, of course, the relationship is quite, with food is completely different from Italy. So Italians are really obsessed with food, but this has always been like that. So this has made things more difficult, for example, for me to work in Italy, because I had to break a lot of hesitant perception on the idea of like bringing food in something that was not normally at the time connected with food. And while in London, I think this has been more open to embrace changes, and without such a strong food culture, it's been kind of easier somehow to make different projects in town.
And give us an example or some examples of the kind of projects that you do.
I don't know, I've done so many projects in almost 20 years, but For example, I create spaces where food is used to activate new form of rituals, like in the water bar, for example. I have designed a few years ago for Selfridges, where people were trying to promote new rituals to avoid the use of single-use plastic bottles, so creating new rituals around water by the glass, and I don't know, I've designed a series of installation where food is considered as a material, so this edible material library, or I've designed a series of interactive performance where people were involved in the making and in the process itself, like pastificio, gnocchi bar. Then I've done a lot of workshop, like investigating different aspects related to food rituality, like the one I have done in Wabouché, digital hunger, or the drink and think. So yeah, these are examples of projects that I've done.
And now to start to think about the manifesto that you've written, obviously we know that now is the time of the COP26 climate conference. We know that food, and particularly the agriculture that produces our food, is one of the worst sources of atmospheric pollution. It's like 17-20% or something like that, I think. So what is your view on the food industry? Is it even beginning to address the problem of the pollution that's caused by food?
Well, the problems related to food are really systemic. There's like a huge massive problems that honestly it's so difficult to imagine how things will change. And so I think we are just at the beginning of rethinking completely the food system, because either is in terms of supply, either is food flows, the way we consume food, the problem of waste, then food is also very deeply connected with nature. So of course, the exploitation, extraction. So it's really a huge systemic problem. So yeah, I think we are literally at the beginning of and so probably we won't see like much changes yet. And but from my point of view, I think we can start from small things, and in our everyday life, at least to change our attitude towards it, our perception of this massive failing system, I would say.
So this is a good point for you to share your screen with us and present your manifesto, your idea for the future.
So when I've been asked by Dezeen, by you, to imagine a manifesto for the next 15 years in my fields, I think I immediately thought about our relationship with two words like prosperity and its counterpart, scarcity. So I really think that we have to completely rethink this relationship, because all the food systems issues, like I've just said, they are somehow related to excess, exaggeration. If you're thinking overconsumption, over exploitation, or extensive. So it's all, if to put it simple, they are a matter of quantity. And so I think we need to consume and to eat less. But the fact is that it's very difficult to embrace a more frugal approach to food, where either it's a catering, either it's shops. It's very difficult to change, to embrace a more frugal approach to it, to moderate ourselves, because in a way, and when I say we, I'm an European living in London, so the epicenter of the consumerist society. We live in the temple of abundance. So either is a supermarket, shops, everywhere, the beauty of abundance is celebrated. and even in gatherings that I've been working on for ages, like abundance is ubiquitous. So we have built for centuries this beauty of abundance of food. So although I have no idea how to solve the big issues that are related with this, so I have tried to concentrate on the small consequences of it, and I believe that we need to build a new narrative that help us to find new form of desires that are not necessarily related to abundance, because we are all attracted by it. So for us, abundance is something that is attractive. And so with this manifesto, I would like to start to build this new narrative of scarcity. And therefore, I've imagined to let's say, symbolically put on the table some keywords that I feel that can help to find a new aesthetic, a new vision that will help me to create new project that makes sense, and hopefully also people to see things differently, at least in the small things, because that is what I've been doing for years, imagining small rituality for embracing change. And so on the table, I've written some images, some words, like sublime simplicity, nomadic frugality, poetic rationing, seductive rituality, ascetic beauty, and even a Japanese word, sesei, that means moderation. Because in a way, we need to moderate ourselves. But how can we perceive moderation not as a deprivation, but something that can still bring us emotion, that can still bring us pleasure? So I've imagined that why don't we rethink completely our food shop and food, or at least spaces dedicated to food, where, so instead of having like piles of fruit and vegetable, towers of jars, why don't we operate a massive decluttering? And it could sound naive, I feel a bit like a Marie Kondo that's trying to clean all the shop, but I imagine a manifesto needs a bit of naivety, because you need to imagine things that are not happening yet. So I would like to make a massive decluttering and make delis where there are just few products, and the one that we literally need, but still having some magic. And for this magic, for example, I would look to something like the unmanned little shop that are quite popular in Japan and Switzerland, in the countryside, where there's just a table and a piece of clothes and few products and a money box. Maybe this is exaggerated, but we need to exaggerate to change such a eradicated approach to display and the way we relate ourselves, even just visually with food. So for me, this is an idea of a sort of ascetic deli, where you find the magic through the simple connection with the product. Or what we don't, we try to, let's say we need to ration our food, but again, rationing is something we associate with deprivation, because of course historically food rationing has been happening during war, during crisis, and still is happening like that. But as a principle, rationing could be a good idea to moderate ourselves. So I think we should transform this rationing something more poetic, something that we feel attracted by, something more appealing. So I don't know, I've imagined, like, can we have a little bakery where even the bread is invited us to moderation? And that's why I have these images, shows like bread with these messages that are taken from Japanese and the Confucianism philosophy. So setsudo or setsuyaku, sesei, so all about moderation and restraint. Or we could look at the frugality of some nomadic food, the way they have been for centuries, great example of parsimonious design. So why don't we eliminate takeaway shop. I'm exaggerating here, but and we substitute with nomadic huts where there are selection of nomadic food they're great ideas for food preservation, but at the same time they also have the cultural elements that we need, because as humans we consume food as something physical, a need, no? But at least if you live in some part of the world, food is so connected with more cultural values and imaginary. So it's no longer something that we just eat to survive. At least I'm saying in our in Europe or in some part of the world. And so I think nomadic frugality could be a good way to find alternative frugal solution. We also need to rethink rituals in a more simple way. Like I feel that, and as I said, I've been part of it. Gatherings and rituality has been complicated and this has been a seed for wasteful behaviors necessarily, because events where there's huge budget, where there are a lot of wastage. So why don't we go to the basics? So why don't we think of rituals that involve even our bodily needs? Like years ago, I was in Japan and I was inspired by a room near a house, an antique house near a temple, where in the middle of the room there was a ice block. And I was attracted by it, and it was there because it was it was offering refreshment. It was offering an occasion to cool down the body, just sitting around it and touch it. And so an action simple like that. Can we reimagine our gatherings following this sublime simplicity? Or still talking about simplicity and with a vernacular approach, why don't we look at old remedies, vernacular method for either purifying the home, purifying our body? And I'm not saying this in a sort of new age or post-new age, but I'm saying more for the way this tradition, they create a more simple way to reconnect with natural treasures that can be then transformed in something that gives us pleasure, but without a strong impact in terms of waste. And so I've imagined these remedy towers, so in a little kiosk with offering these remedies, maybe collected for all around the world tradition. And then the last, that is a bit more difficult to describe, but it's, why don't we bring, in reimagining completely our shop, a bit of the magic of nature? When I say the magic of nature, I'm not imagining like, let's bring trees inside a shop, even though there are some examples of this has been done, but more like the poetic connection with. So these images, for example, talk about a anthropochory, that is the dispersal of seeds by human. And I found super poetic the fact that beyond any borders, and other topics that with which food has been deeply connected, and still it's deeply connected. The seeds are traveling, moved by the wind, but also by human, like just attached to clothes and or even air. So I've imagined, why don't we make this anthropochorium, where instead of planning, we are dependent by the unpredictability of nature. So we kind of eat only what is coming with the seeds moved by the winds or by human, or so it brings a bit of unpredictability, and this is what and magic of nature in a world of retail, where instead everything has been planned and hardly and conceived in every details by human. So this is more or less what I have imagined for this Dezeen manifesto.
Thank you very much. And at the end of your manifesto, do you want to unshare your screen now, Francesca?
Yes.
At the end of your manifesto, you've proposed 5 scenarios: the aesthetic Delhi, the long word you just mentioned, anthropocorium.
Actually, I forgot an image.
And the Epiphany Room, the Remedy Tower. What are all these? Are these proposals for potential ways that we could live this, a celebration of scarcity?
Yes, I think they are proposal and idea. I mean, they are for me sort of kiosk, and I say kiosk as a either could be spaces, kiosk, but the idea that a small action that we could experiment to try to find a new narrative to feel more embraced by scarcity in a positive way. So we need to change our behavior. And I've always tried to concentrate on how we can make accessible also some complex problem in a very, as I said, naive way. And then I think that this, I call it kiosk for the moment. It's a work in progress. I've been working this in the next 15 years, so I have time to define them. But yeah, it's more like finding elements that will serve as starting point to rethink what we have done in terms of food shop, food caterings, and thinking differently. And since I work, let's say, on a border, on artist practice, I see that I can experiment on it, and maybe they can inspire bigger change on a system that is very difficult to change. It was like that in the end when I started the small action of I don't know, gnocchi bar many years ago. At the time, and like the idea of like people were involving in the process, making. It was considered a bit naive, and aesthetically, I've always researched this naivety. But I think from small things we can learn a lot, especially when the project is so big that it's difficult to imagine omnicomprehensive solution.
And you mentioned this word anthropocori, which means the way that seeds are dispersed, right? With humans helping out to disperse seeds, but without really realizing it. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, and what's the relevance of that natural process to your manifesto?
Well, it's probably, I mean, I find it attractive that observing some natural process, we can realize the poetry of small things. And so anthropocori, I'm attracted by it for two reasons. One, because I think it's a sort of cooperation between the nature and man, so between plants and men. So I like to imagine this as a form of commensalism. So it's like where two people, persons sitting on the same table. So for me, it symbolically gives an idea of how we can sit at the same table and reimagine the way we conceive caterings and our food relationship in general. And the second reason why I like is also this freely connection with borders. You know? So it's like seeds that goes beyond any borders, and that maybe is slightly less connected with the manifest itself, but the idea of a derive that you cannot control. I think this is the magic of creativity. So, and this is what I've been trying to do for many years. So it brings a bit of magic in the everyday life.
And you also mentioned nomadic food. Can you talk again about the examples of nomadic food? You showed like a string hanging on a wall with lots of brown things hanging on them. What exactly was that?
That is a curut. It's a fermented milk that a nomadic population of the Asian steppes consume. And it's a way to preserve milk, a sort of cheese in a way, but it lasts much longer. So it's perfect for its durability. And but of course, it's connected also with the communities, because each community has its own way of preparing it. And so I'm fascinated by it, because it's a good example on how you can have food that is for a physical need. So it's to answer a primal need, because this nomadic population use it for feeding, for survive. But at the same time, it has on a lot of values that implies a connection with the community, something that brings together the community, and it's about tradition, it's about cultural implications. So I like, because of this double value of something substantial, something that is primal, answer to a primal need, and but at the same time it has its own poetic value.
And as an Italian, as someone from a country where the ritual of getting together at the table is so important, what do you think about the concept of food that you eat not sitting down, that you take with you or you have in your pocket or something like that?
Well, that is controversial, because I think it's human interaction. It's important for consuming food also in a more meaningful way. So food on the go, like it kind of lose the conviviality, the fascination of conviviality, the importance of human interaction through food. And so I'm not a big fan of it. But then, of course, we also need to reinvent the way we consume food, depending on how society evolves. That's why I'm thinking nomadic food maybe can also open path for new ideas of nomadic food.
There's a lot of attention now on the waste that's generated by food. Apparently, like a third of all food gets thrown away. And I suppose you could compare that to the fashion industry, perhaps, which is also very, very wasteful. And now people are starting to think, well, maybe I could just buy less clothes and wear them for longer. Do you think the same approach could apply to food?
In a way, yes. I mean, there are similarities. What it makes difference that food is also something primal. So it answer to some, to our body needs. So you always have to keep in mind that when you are imagining behavior that are connected with food. But in a way, yeah, in both, I think in both industry, there's a need of this massive decluttering, and therefore, like, we need to consume less. But it doesn't work if you just say, okay, let's consume less. Probably for fashion, it's easier, because it's more like an addiction that is related to your the way you are perceived, the way you want to be perceived. While food also, and maybe this is related to what you were saying, that food is also about like convivial moments, brings on the table a more complex, a series of complex aspects that are related to it. So it's somehow is even more difficult to say, okay, let's stop. I can easily say I don't buy any clothes for 1 year, no, and then of course you could feel, oh, I don't look like as I would. But food, can you, 1 year, and this probably in the last year we have experienced it. Can you imagine 1 year without having any convivial moment with your friends and your family? It's hard. So yeah, the massive decluttering food is even more complex. And of course, I mean, I'm not talking about the economic implication, because I don't have the skills to really imagine the system in a overall. So that's why I'm concentrating on the small things.
And in your work, do you always work with natural food? Because there's been a huge movement over the last 10 years about things being fresh and natural, fish from the sea and vegetables from the land. And there's a whole kind of marketing story that's told around that, which often is untrue because often comes from really horrific conditions. But also people are starting to say, well, we can make food in laboratories, we can grow meat, we can make proteins from insects and things like that. What is your feeling about that kind of approach to food, which could potentially mean that we can return the land that's used for farming to nature?
Well, I think it's again, it's a matter of quantity. Also there we need to find the right balance. So I'm not against, in principle, in finding solution that can help to reduce the overexploitation of our land. So the idea of growing meat or growing alternative protein in general, it could be part of the solution of this overexploitation. But at the same time, I believe that we still have to change our approach also to that. I'm making a very simple example. Now there are many trends. You say, okay, I stop eating this food, or no, let's not eat this anymore because it's not produced sustainably, and it's right. It's something that we should stop. But at the same time, we just like pass from one reduction to another without really solving the problem. Think about the avocado. Like I always make this example because it's quite tangible. Now there was the trend, and avocado is good for our health. There's a lot of good properties, so everybody eating avocado. And then what happens that there is start the need for cultivation avocado everywhere, and then it's causing droughts in countries that were cultivating avocado. I'm simplifying. I know that the supply chain is much more complex than that, but more or less that is what happened. And this happened with many food trends. So I believe that we can't solve the food system issues just seeing it as one element at a time. I think it's more this change of attitude is fundamental, and moderation. It's a key, because even meat, and this again, I'm simplifying something where there are a lot of implications. But what if the problem of meat starts apart from as you can see in relation with the animals itself, but in terms of food, the problem of meat has started because there was an overconsumption of it. There are like countries where there is the consumption of meat is above the average, like so many points. So it's what if places like that, instead of like just banning completely the meat, they learn how to moderate the consumption of it. And this is what is all the manifesto is all about, finding new ways on how we can moderate ourselves, but still finding pleasure, still building, still having desire for the food. So yeah, this is how I see it. Still a matter of moderation, even in new things that they are welcome to find solution.
I think there's a difference between moderation, which is a concept whereby you see abundance, but you only choose to have enough that you need, and scarcity, which I think scares people because it makes people think they're not going to get enough, and it causes panic buying and things like that. You saw that during the pandemic when there was this apparent scarcity of toilet roll, so everyone went crazy and bought loads of toilet roll. Also, people will voluntarily moderate their food when they're on a diet or something. But I remember once when I was young and I was living in a house in a quite remote place, and that I went to the fridge and there literally wasn't enough food there, and I started to really panic. It became like a psychological problem for me that I might not be able to get enough to eat. So how do you, I know that your manifesto is a provocation, but how can you get people to accept the notion of scarcity, which is normal in times of war or famine, when you know that there's a situation that you can't control, but the lack of scarcity is a sign that everything's okay in the world?
Yeah, I think we need to, what I said, and we need to change our perception of scarcity. So and we need, as my case as a designer, it's my duty to propose projects that reimagine way to perceive scarcity not as a deprivation, but something that is the consequences of our wasteful behavior, but at the same time, it's the solution to it. So I don't have a magic hat, but little steps could help, at least to change our attitudes towards maybe more radical solution. You mentioned, for example, the insects. No, there's been a lot of debates around that, and it's not just about using insects to produce protein-based food. And first is needed a change of perception of it, at least in countries where insects are not perceived as a delicacy, while in other countries they are. So yes, this behavioral change, I think, comes from changing the perception of it. So you cannot impose an insect diet if you don't change unless, as you said, it's during war and you cannot choose. No, but when you have the choice, that's the problem. When you have the choice, you tend to follow what has been part of your cultural heritage for years, and abundance has been there. I grew up in the 80s, so abundance is in my DNA. But since the forecast for the future are also talking about possible food scarcity, that it won't be like a choice, but it would be the consequences of our behavior towards the land exploitation. I think it's better to rethink the way we see it, and start now to embrace scarcity in design as well.
I was talking to the guy who owns a 5-star hotel, and he was trying to make the hotel more environmentally friendly. And the first idea they had was to reduce the waste at breakfast. They had a breakfast buffet. When you go into a nice hotel and you have this buffet which goes on for half a kilometer with mountains of every single thing you could possibly want to eat. And apparently it's an extremely wasteful system, partly because they have to throw away a lot of the food, the freshly cut fruit and the freshly cut cheese and meat. They have to throw it away at the end of the breakfast session because they can't use it the next day. But partly also because people take way more food on their plates than they can eat. They get greedy when they see all this abundance, and then they just leave it. And they tried then to make the buffet more of a minimalist buffet with less things. But then the customers complained. They thought that they were not getting their money's worth. So they were demanding food that they didn't actually want to eat, just because it felt to them like that was the luxury experience they needed.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so scared of scarcity that if you enter a shop, I don't know, maybe, and on the shelf, for example, let's say a bakery, since I've mentioned it, like there is only few pieces, you immediately, oh, well, it's not good, or it's like, you kind of feel it's a repulsive. Scarcity in a way is repulsive. And this is because the mythology, the huge mythology that has been built around abundance. So it's a mythology that builds for centuries. So it's not easy to change. If you think of banquets, Roman banquets, they were a celebration of quantity, of abundance, of prosperity. It's like this amazing banquet, and also for myself, there's been a reference for years. It's like I'm attracted by these plentiful tables. But yeah, so even for breakfast is the same. These banquets that where we don't celebrate the abundance, at the moment is scaring us. Is completely unattractive. That's why we need design. And since you mentioned minimalist, I'm not saying that we should perceive a minimalistic aesthetic, because it could be a first answer to it. It's a bit like in fashion. You have like moment of of decoration, and then you reduce it to minimalist, a sort of alternate wave, between decoration and in a bit same in food. You have, but in food, in a way, the wave has always stayed on the abundant side. Scarcity is always felt as something negative, because in places where you don't have the choice, it is something negative, and that is like makes difficult to work on food as just a design tool.
It's interesting that you're talking about minimalism, and minimalism, has been, maybe it's going out of fashion a bit now, but it has been seen as a luxury, that you have spaces that don't have very much in them, very simple materials, maybe luxurious materials, but simple at the same time. And minimalist kitchens have been really, really fashionable for a long time now. But the food is not minimalist at all, is it? The food is maximalist. People never think to apply minimalism to the dinner plate for some reason.
Yeah, it's true. It's maximalism in food. It seems like the winning trend since centuries. And but honestly, I think some of the example I have put on the table, I say in this presentation, they are possibilities for something new. I want to work on it more. It's for sure we need to find solution where the scarcity is brings something positive in terms of the way we experience it. That's why I'm looking at the rituality, and then it's not minimalistic, but it's more like vernacular perception, because food is something that communicates to everybody. So minimalist aesthetic, they tend to be quite selective in the audience they speak to, while with food we need to speak to everybody. So I think, vernacular solution, they are more probably helpful to reimaging a minimalistic approach to food, but that doesn't have sophisticated aesthetic that is perceived together with minimalist in art, in design, as you say, like the kitchen. No, so it's that is also what I've been interested more. No? This I love to look at vernacular hacking method of things, because they talked about the everyday life, while the minimalist, you see it something far.
I remember reading a book about a traveler who lived in Spain about 100 years ago, and he would talk about the ritual of dinner then at a time of scarcity. And he described, I think it was 4 men who shared one bowl of food in the evening, and they all used their spoons to kind of meticulously only eat the quarter that was theirs. Even though they were starving hungry, they all respected the boundaries of all the other people. It was quite beautiful. I'm not sure I would want to have been there at that time, but it was a beautiful story. Francesca, so much. It's a very, very provocative idea. Maybe let's get together and have a minimalist dinner at some point, and maybe have to then get a kebab on the way home afterwards if I'm still hungry. But it's a really beautiful and provocative idea, and good luck with your future work on that. And thanks very much for putting this together for our birthday celebration.